so well.
The chairman of the California Democrat Party is calling for an immediate boycott of the legendary West Coast burger chain because In-N-Out dropped $25,000 to help elect Republicans in the state. As you might expect, conservatives are weighing in. This is Steve Greenhut of the Sacramento-based R Street Institute.
In what world can we not donate, can a company not donate to one of the two major parties in the United States? That's worthy of a boycott? I mean, that's silly.
Former Golden Stater Greg Scott, who now works in D.C., says the left learned nothing from its ill-fated boycott of Chick-fil-A several years ago.
Whereas the resistance wants to burn down buildings, I have a feeling that In-N-Out is going to be flipping a lot more burgers.
The only question he has is the wisdom of donating to Republicans in California, a species as endangered as a Democrat socialist with a sense of humor. Then again,
who knows? Maybe this is a turning point in the history of California politics at the burger stand.
Scott thinks the boycott will play poorly, even among liberal Californians.
In-N-Out has a loyal, almost cult-like following on the West Coast. I've been there. I've lived it. I've seen it.
In fact, we snuck a microphone into Democrat Party headquarters as they discussed the boycott.
I would do anything for love, but I won't do that.
And spending on U.S. construction projects ticked up 0.1% in July, led by an increase in home building and the publicly funded building of schools and highways. American Family News is online at onenewsnow.com and download the One News Now mobile app. I'm Rusty Pugh.
Abraham Hamilton III.
God put us in this world at this time to be salt and light. We don't fool because of the darkness that we're facing. This is not the first time in the world's history that it's gotten dark. God has called you and I to be his ambassadors, even in this dark moment.
Tune in to the Hamilton Corner, weekdays at 5 p.m. Central on Urban Family Talk. She's sharp, pointed, and insightful. This is Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
It'll never be enough. I mean, as someone said famously over the weekend, how many documents do you need before you go ahead and vote no? Is this going to be 51-49?
You know, I don't know. I'm going to vote yes because the people of Texas want a strong, principled constitutionalist who will defend our fundamental liberties, who will defend free speech, who will defend religious liberty, who will defend the Second Amendment.
Of all the financial titans and philanthropists of the 20th century, none are more complex or mysterious than George Soros. He amassed billions through ruthless business decisions. He can move world financial markets simply by voicing an opinion, or destabilize a government by buying and selling its currency.
I am basically there to make money. I cannot and do not look at the social consequences of what I do. I don't feel guilty because I'm engaged in an amoral activity which is not meant to have anything to do with guilt.
And now, Stacy Washington.
Welcome to the program. How was your Labor Day? You're probably not even thinking about Labor Day anymore because of what's going on today. Monumental, historic, some of the most descriptive words that we have available to us in the English dictionary are being used to describe the momentous hearings that are going on right now for our next Supreme Court Justice, Brett Kavanaugh. And so as often as we kind of critique and look at the different options that we have and how, you know, Kavanaugh, initially, we were saying right here on this good radio air that we weren't as excited about him because there were some things that we felt in his 300 opinions that weren't exactly rock solid conservatism. In fact, we felt there were a couple, maybe Amy Coney Barrett, maybe a couple of the others on the list of 25 from the Heritage Foundation and the Federalist Society would be better choices for us. But as time has worn on, and obviously we're not getting another pick, this is who will fill this next vacancy, we have, after examination, really come to feel that this is a really good opportunity for us. So what's happening today? Well, according to the Democrats, our democracy is at issue. There is a threat, an existential threat, and his name is Brett Kavanaugh, and he is right now simultaneously sitting in the hearing room, being subjected to the most lengthy soliloquies I've ever endured. 3 hours of it today I've listened to. And I can tell you the only parts that I really felt like, broadened my mental discourse and encouraged my synapses to fire at a ever faster rate were the comments of Ben Sasse and Ted Cruz. And there were some others who were pretty good. But for the most part, the Democrats were fear-mongering and obstructing and really playing the role of worm tongue, trying to convince the nominee, Justice Kavanaugh, to ask for a recess so that they could examine documents that they declined to examine since they first heard his name and decided they were going to vote against him. I know. If you're laughing like me, you're thinking, what? You want more documents. You want more time to review those documents, even though you didn't review the first 140,000 pages because you weren't voting for him because he's extreme. Yeah. So that's what's going on right now. So today on the show, we're going to cover that. We have a fantastic guest for you. It's Dean Nelson of the Human Coalition. He's going to come on and talk about this billboard from the AFIA group down in Dallas, Texas, and what they're doing with that. And then also, more importantly, how the reaction from the Democrats, which is completely and utterly about the abortion issue, is really playing badly for them with mainstream Americans. We'll take your calls in the third segment. And then in hour two, as promised, I'm going to break down this George Soros thing. So we had some questions about that when he was mentioned during the Ann Coulter interview last week. And then at other points, we've talked about George Soros. And people were asking in the comments, well, I mean, how is he allowed to operate in the United States? Well, he answers that question himself. And so we'll be getting into that. And I just found some really great stuff. And then, of course, breaking news, and we'll take calls on that in the third segment of hour two as well. Governor Ducey of Arizona has announced that he is nominating Senator John Kill to replace John McCain, and that will provide the last vote needed to clear the nomination hurdle and confirm Justice Kavanaugh without the help of the Democrats. But we're still expecting 2 or 3, at least according to Ted Cruz. Senator Ted Cruz says he expects 2 or 3 Democrats to cross the aisle and to vote for Justice Kavanaugh, even in the face of all of the opposition. And it has been stark. I heard what sounded like shrieks from an insane asylum this morning. Protesters would run into the room, and before, I guess, the Capitol Police could grab them, I'm not sure what exactly the procedure was in the beginning, they would just stand at the back and scream whatever they wanted. And their voices, unhinged, lunacy. It was just crazy. So that was going on. So we're going to listen to a little bit of, first of all, you're wondering probably, well, who knew what hearing room to be in, like how these protesters seem organized? Well, they are, because the Democrats had a conference call in which the Senate leadership and activists spoke about who they were going to have in the room, who was going to request time to announce who was in the room, Senator Feinstein. She asked for time to acknowledge people who were significant in the gallery, which is crazy pants because all Americans are significant when it comes to the consideration of a Supreme Court nominee, not just people who advocate on behalf of LGBT or abortion. All of us are significant, whether we're taxpayers or whether we're on disability, whatever we might be doing. If we're citizens of this country, we're all significant in the SCOTUS nomination process. So you've got Durbin. He gets called on the carpet about this. Did you guys actually have a conference call to organize these disruptions? Because they were so loud and so virulent in their screaming and screeching that the senators on the panel who make up the panel that gives the advice and consent on SCOTUS nominees, they couldn't even get a word in edgewise. They literally were getting shouted down by these crazed protesters. So Durbin actually admits that this was what they organized here in number 5.
Mr. Chairman, I'm confused because I heard earlier that this was a reaction to the document releases last night, but I'm reviewing a tweet from NBC that said Democrats plotted coordinated protest strategy over the holiday weekend, all agreed to disrupt and protest the hearing, sources tell me. And subsequent Dem leader Chuck Schumer led a phone call, and committee members are executing now. So I just want to be clear. None of the members on this committee participated in that phone call or that strategy. before the documents were released yesterday? Is this, are you suggesting that this allegation is false?
This is outrageous.
Senator Durbin.
Mr. Chairman, there was a phone conference yesterday, and I can tell you at the time of the phone conference, many issues were raised.
Okay, so they did have a phone conference, and many issues were raised, including who was going to do what screaming at what points. In addition to that, the Democrats on the committee also executed this lengthy disruption of the hearing this morning to screech about, you guessed it, Trump derangement syndrome and Donald Trump. How Donald Trump is an unindicted co-conspirator of some sort, which is a term that is reserved for individuals who are already suspected of criminal acts by law enforcement, not by the general public or activists, and have been known to engage in criminal activity. Unindicted co-conspirator means you're not tangentially connected, as President Trump is, to the two individuals who most recently have received indictments. Remember, the two individuals, Paul Manafort and Michael Cohen, are connected to the president through their business interests, but one's an attorney, the other one ran the campaign for 140 days to get it through the convention. But they're being convicted of things that are outside of those activities. How was Donald Trump to know when he first hired Paul Manafort that he was under investigation by the FBI for tax evasion, especially since that would have been the purview of the IRS? Wiretap fraud, et cetera, et cetera. Those things have nothing to do with the presidential campaign. So while liberal activists are jumping around saying, well, there's been all these indictments. Indictments on what? The rubber meets the road in the connections and what the indictments are for. None of them are for collusion. None of them are for obstruction. None of them have anything to do with the campaign. Now, show me those ones that have to do with the campaign, and I'll take a look. I'm open to seeing whatever evidence is out there and listening to whatever or reading about whatever the special counsel hands down in the way of indictments on anyone. I want the truth. I want justice. But this isn't it. So next up, you've got a continuing theme of the morning, which is we haven't had enough time to review the documents, which they declined to review, by the way, the 140,000 pages that were presented as a part of the record of Justice Kavanaugh for review by those who are tasked with voting and advising and consenting the president on his nominees to the Supreme Court of the United States. They declined to do so. Only one Democrat requested a copy of those documents. Everyone else simply did not. So now they're saying, well, there's millions of documents that should have been made available to us, but they weren't. And because of that, we're not able to go forward with our advise and consent role. And of course, you know, Ted Cruz, he's on a radio program and he's asked about these papers and he talks about it. Now, this is before the hearing started, and we have two bits from him. This first one is he's talking about these so-called Kavanaugh documents, but are they really from Justice Kavanaugh? It's number 6.
So it is a massive pile of papers that has been handed over. It's far more than was handed over for Justice Kagan. It is far more than was handed over for Justice Sotomayor. But what the Democrats are doing, and they're not really hiding it, is that they're playing games and they're trying to have a stalling tactic. So they're focused on, look, the main papers that matter are the 300 published opinions in these issues. And those are all out there for everyone to examine. You want to know what kind of judge this is? Well, we've got over a decade a real demonstration what kind of judge he is. The game the Democrats are playing is one of the positions he had 15, 20 years ago during the George W. Bush administration was what's called staff secretary. Now, staff secretary is the person who handles the paper coming into the president. And so just about everyone sends paper through the staff secretary. Now, the staff secretary isn't writing the paper. That's coming from the Attorney General, the Secretary of State, senior White House officials. But the staff secretary is the funnel that gets it to the president. What the Democrats are demanding is they want to see every single piece of paper that essentially has the president there. Well, they don't have any right to do that. No other president has ever handed over. I mean, there are rules and laws governing what presidential documents public when. And the Democrats know there's no way the Bush White House and it's the Bush White House and the archive that are making this determination.
So it's not that the National Archives were gone around in some way. It's that the documents that the Democrats are screaming about are rightly not being made available to them because some of them are confidential communiques from the State Department to the President of the United States at the time. The only reason that they're even connected to Justice Kavanaugh is because he was the record person at the time. So his role in the White House was to receive the records from, say, the State Department. Remember, this is before email. This is before people were just zipping and flitting information to each other via their smartphones. None of this stuff existed. So pieces of paper with important information on them, classified, highly classified, top secret, Yankee White, all that stuff, that's brought over, and he's the record keeper, meaning he has to acknowledge that he received the document, taking responsibility for it and passing it on to the recipient, whoever is the name recipient on the document. That is the chain of documents that had to be maintained at the time. That was the way it was done. So the Democrats are saying if Kavanaugh was sitting in the office and was the record keeper at the time, those millions of documents that passed through his hands, which he didn't make opinions on, he didn't author them, he didn't even respond to them, he merely received them, logged them in, and passed them to the president or the Secretary of State or whomever, that all of those documents need to be gone over. It's a rabbit trail. They don't care to review those documents. They're simply making an issue of it because they want to delay this confirmation hearing until after the election. They assume that they will be able to stop Kavanaugh from being put on the Supreme Court after the election, the blue wave or something or other. Yeah, that's all it is. So we'll listen to the other two pieces in the third segment when we take your calls. Right now, we're going to go to the break, and then we have Dean Nelson, National Outreach Director for Human Coalition. He'll be with us up next. Stay there.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tim Wildman, president of American Family Association and American Family Radio. You know, the very first day in Israel, when we're staying in Jerusalem, we go to the Mount of Olives. And it's there at the Mount of Olives we look out over the old city of Jerusalem. It's a spectacular sight. You've seen it in pictures before, but it's another thing to actually be there as we walk down from the Mount of Olives to the Garden of Gethsemane, and we pray there. It's going to be a wonderful time with brothers and sisters from around the country visiting the Holy Land, the land of Jesus. If you want information on this March 14th through the 22nd tour, just call us and we'll send you a brochure. Call 1-800-FAMILIES, F-A-M-I-L-I-E-S, option 5, and leave us your name and your address and we'll mail you a brochure. Or if you want to simply go online at twholyland.com, everything's there. twholyland.com.
Hi, I'm Crawford Loritz with a Legacy Moment. I have a great auto mechanic. He's thorough and he knows what he's doing. He's amazing. He has a well-deserved reputation for fairness and integrity. I know from first-hand experience he stands completely and thoroughly behind his work. If it's not right, he makes it right at no additional charge. He understands his work is a reflection of his character. Well, God's work is a reflection of his character too, isn't it? In other words, whatever God does, whatever he says, whatever he promises, is a complete, wonderful, perfect reflection of his nature and character. That's what we read in Titus chapter 1, verses 1 through 3. Paul, a bondservant of God and an apostle of Jesus Christ, for the faith of those chosen of God and the knowledge of the truth which is according to godliness, in the hope of eternal life, which God, who cannot lie, promised long ages ago, but at the proper time manifested even his word in the proclamation with which I was entrusted, according to the commandment of God our Savior. The Apostle Paul begins by saying, "The one I represent cannot lie, and what I'm about to say is a reflection of him whom I represent." God has never told a lie. This is terribly important, especially if you're struggling with the assurance of your salvation. If you sincerely placed your faith in Jesus Christ, I don't care when it was, you turn to him and you're in good hands. Here's what I want you to remember today. Our salvation rests not in our hands, but it's lodged in the integrity of God himself. Our eternal future is secure simply because God says so. If you've committed your life to Christ, you belong to him, and God always stands by his word.
Join Crawford Loritz tomorrow for another Legacy Moment.
This is Stacy on the Right with Stacy Washington on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Welcome back to the program. I hope your Labor Day was not full of labor. I hope it was carefree and awesome. And now you're back with us, and we're so glad to be with you. AFR.net and UrbanFamilyTalk.com are the websites where you can find out more and hit the subscribe button. So right now, let's go to our guest. We have Dean Nelson, National Outreach Director for Human Coalition. Dean, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, Stacey, it's always great to be with you. Thanks so much for hosting. This is an exciting topic, and I'm glad to be on again.
So let's do two things. We first have to cover this billboard because there's been kind of some more activity on it. Their PR people were actually tweeting me today trying to correct me in my assertion that this has anything to do with Planned Parenthood. Now, Planned Parenthood does the abortions, not the Afia Center. And second of all, they are basically likening having an abortion to some kind of spa day for black women. Only for black women. Just black women are supposed to think of abortion as a spa day. Then I want to pivot over to Justice Kavanaugh's hearings today and what that means for us working towards getting a pro-life nominee up there.
Well, first I will talk about the billboards that gone up in Dallas. So I first heard about it. Actually, I was proud to say this through my daughter. She's much more busy on Twitter than I am, so she's actually sent it to me. I saw it, and to say I was shocked is no longer the truth because I see this type of stuff all of the time. And how the abortion industry strategically uses black women, and they always will find, a small group, and they talk about it in the context of reproductive justice. Those are words that they have done research on, have found that actually plays well within our community. So to say I was shocked, I was not shocked. I was disappointed. But it does show that the work that the Black Pro-Life Coalition and others like you are doing, bringing attention to the horrible, tragedy of abortion within our community. Because this billboards, popped up, about a month after billboards that our organization, the Black Pro-Life Coalition, put up in Dallas that basically said the opposite, that abortion is not health care. And so it does show that the word is getting out. There was a lot of attention, radio as well as television attention that was given to the billboard that we put up in Dallas about a little over a month ago. So I was, disheartened to see it, but to know that they're responding to what we're doing, and that is telling people the truth about abortion and that black Americans do not need abortion, and abortion is not health care.
Absolutely. And I think their initial billboard they thought would be a good foil to what you put up, and it's you and Pastor Broden and others who got together and put that billboard up. And what they're doing is they're saying, look, it's not that big of a deal, but it is, and it's important for us to acknowledge that. So that dovetails in with the news of the day for this entire week. The biggest story in America right now is the Kavanaugh hearings, and the Democrats on the committee are really showing their support for abortion and for gun control in all of their comments about they absolutely refuse to acknowledge the capability, the appropriateness of Justice Kavanaugh. So how do you see the marketing campaign that's been going on all over the country? It's not just billboards in Dallas. It's all over the country. Essence Magazine, people who support abortion are pushing this idea that it's not only horrible to go to a pregnancy resource center, but it's horrible to even second guess having an abortion. And then you see the same kind of antics coming out of people on the left during this confirmation hearing.
Yeah, I mean, you can expect that the abortion industry has and will continue to spend a whole lot of money to protest, to do anything that they can, because they recognize that, number one, abortion numbers nationally are going down. The more that you have in certain states, many states, there are more restrictions that are being placed on abortion because people know that abortion is bad. People know that abortion is horrible. Even people that end up getting abortion. Remember, it used to be with the Clinton administration, safe, legal, and rare. I mean, they used to emphasize that abortion should be rare, but they don't use that language anymore because the abortion industry it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. Planned Parenthood themselves is an organization that has over $1 billion in assets and $1 billion every year, with up to $500 million of those dollars coming from the government. So we know that ultimately it's about business. They are making money hand over fist. They will continue to market in our communities. They'll continue to put their new abortion clinics in Black and in urban and Hispanic communities. As they're closing them down in more white communities, they are putting them up in urban communities continually. I mean, it's still, I think it's 79% was the last stat that I saw of their abortion facilities are in Black or Latino communities. And so they are going to continue to fight against anything, particularly with a Supreme Court justice that, has good ratings, from conservative organizations. They are petrified because if this, in fact, moves forward and more restrictions are placed on abortion, it is going to, they're going to see, the bottom line is going to affect them and their Margaret Sanger's dream of, we don't want word to get out that we want to exterminate the Negro population. I mean, that will become extinct, and that's our prayer. Our prayer is that we at Human Coalition, we like to say it this way, we want to make abortion unthinkable and unavailable. We don't want people to even be able to think that abortion should be an option. We want people to think that bringing a child into the world is something that is positive, something that is good, that no child should be, killed just because of a decision of his mother and or his father.
Absolutely. So I wanted to say thank you so much for coming on today. We have a jam-packed show, and I wanted to thank you for coming on and joining us for especially for the billboard. And I don't think enough people know about it. Obviously, it's viral on Twitter. It's viral on social media. My tweet had 24,000 likes and over 13,000 retweets, which is not my normal Twitter activity. So it definitely struck a nerve. I encourage people to go to Human Coalition and check it out, and also to support your local pregnancy resource centers and just keep this in prayer. As Dean just said, our most powerful weapon against this is prayer, but we have to be active as well in supporting a biblical worldview, which you cannot have the biblical worldview and advocate for abortion or support it in any way. So we've got to make that clear and be more judicious in our. It's either or. We don't have any middle ground on abortion any longer, and I hope that people will hear that and carefully consider where we're coming from here. Dean, what's the website for Human Coalition?
Yeah, if you just visit humancoalition.org, they can find not just good information and how to support our organization, but we also provide a large number of videos to help people to communicate effectively about how precious life is, and not just talking about, how horrible abortion is, which it is, but there are a lot of great videos that are there. And I would encourage your listening audience to continue to push back, continue to post during social media about this. One of the things that I did notice, Stacey, was a lot of the Twitter information, people that I would not have suspected. I mean, they're using four-letter words and everything like that, but they're talking about how abortion is horrible and how black people can do better. And so I think that it's really important for us to push back. Even when I went to the FIS Center's website, they had people that were posting against them even on their Facebook page. So I think that it's really important for us, people who understand that, a pro-life ethic is what is good for America, and particularly for Black America. The more that we continue to communicate that effectively through different channels, I think that we'll see a greater groundswell of folks that will come around to understanding that being pro-life and pushing the idea that all people are created equally, whether they're inside the womb or not, is what's going to benefit the African-American community and America.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Dean, for joining us today. Talk to you again soon. Human Coalition.
Bless you. Have a good one.
All right, you too. So what we're going to do now is there's another huge story out, which is that Nike's stock has dropped by 3%, which is huge for a company, on the heels of them making Colin Kaepernick one of their ambassadors for the revival of the Just Do It ad campaign. Now, if you're in my age range or thereabouts, you remember the Just Do It ad campaign. Do you not? The Nike swoosh, it was Just Do It, and it was inspirational messages of people who had overcome, people who were athletes who went above and beyond what their physical capabilities should have been. It wasn't just the people that were in sports like basketball and all of that stuff. It was also regular people who were totally killing it, and we would see them in the ads, and they were very inspirational, and they were fantastic for Nike. They sold a lot of athletic gear and shoes based on those ads. Well, they're now bringing those back with a group of individuals to include Colin Kaepernick. And you better believe Nike owners of shoes, of athletic wear, of socks, they've been burning their socks, burning their shoes, cutting their shoes up. One guy cut the socks into tiny pieces and ate them. I mean, it's a bit off the chain, but people are upset. So we're going to talk about that, and I'm going to take calls on it in the third segment. Right now, I want to finish listening to Ted Cruz, and this is important for us to know because this is what you're going to hear. You're going to be at work. You're going to be at the grocery store. You're going to be at the library. Wherever you are, you're going to hear people saying, you know, this is the first time ever in the history of this country that a Supreme Court nominee has had millions of documents withheld, and the level of dishonesty here is unprecedented, and it's connected to Donald Trump. That's not true. And I'm so sick of the lies. This morning, I actually blurted out a couple of times. One of them is my pet peeve with Democrats, because Democrats want Americans to think that America is a democracy, but democracy is mob rule. If you've ever heard of America, you know it's a representative republic. The reason they don't call it a republic is because republic sounds too much like Republicans. Regardless of who gets the little nod in the name, you have to be true to what it is. We are not a democracy. If we were, we would vote on every single issue ourselves. We would not vote through representatives who go to Congress and the number of them are direct apportionment. One representative for every so many tens of thousands of people. Congressional districts. Each district has a representative, and then 2 senators from every state. Instead of having New Hampshire have a half of a senator or a quarter of a senator, and having California have 55 senators based on their population. That wouldn't be fair. So what we need to do, quite honestly, is we've got to be honest. And so that's what this is. I want to listen to Ted Cruz. He's explaining about the Democrats making a demand that they know it's utterly impossible to meet and asking for these millions of documents. It's number 7.
In other words, those documents written by other people say nothing, zero, about Judge Kavanaugh's views, and they say nothing, zero, about what kind of justice Judge Kavanaugh would make. But they are, by necessity, the most sensitive and confidential documents in a White House. They are the documents that are going to the president. This is the advice and deliberations of the president at the senior level, and the staff secretary is the conduit for those documents. So why is it that the Democrats are putting so much energy in saying, hand over all of those documents? Because they know beyond a shadow of doubt that President George W. Bush's White House team is not going to allow every piece of paper that went to the president to be made public any more than any other White House would. Republican or Democrat, no White House would allow every piece of paper that went to and from the president to be made public.
No president would allow that, including President Obama. So if you had a nominee who served at any point in any part of the government during the Obama administration, and the Republicans asked for every single document that passed through that nominee's hands, even documents that had nothing to do, or it's not even a question of even. None of those documents have anything to do with Justice Kavanaugh's fitness for the Supreme Court, because none of those documents have anything to do with his judicial opinions. Now, the man has issued over 300 judicial opinions. Those are the opinions that you want to read. You want to read his articles from the journals that he's, these lawyers write articles in journals. He's also written an 800-page book to give you a little bit of, we're talking about political books and books that we read that are, you get a book for book club. That's considered to be a lengthy book. A book that's over 250 pages, that's right in the zone. Anything above that, you're approaching novel length. 400 to 450 pages is considered a novel. That's a considerable undertaking. It's what writers and editors call a heavy lift. Then you have his book on precedent that he co-authored with another judge that is over 800 pages. So please let me know, the same individuals, Democrats, who couldn't be bothered to read the Obamacare morass, which was, how many pages was that? 2,500. None of them read it. Not one Democrat read it. In fact, Nancy Pelosi made a name for herself by saying, we need to pass the bill to find out what's in it. In other words, I'm not going to bother to read that if you don't pass it. I don't want to waste my time reading 2,500 pages if you're not going to actually pass the bill. So pass it first, and then we'll see what's in it. Like a present, like a surprise gift from a friend, only this gift's not from a friend, and it stinks before you open it. That was Obamacare, and they didn't read that. They're not reading the 140,000 pages of information that were provided that were directly relevant to how he would rule on cases, meaning how he has ruled in the past. They already know the decisions that he's made that they don't like. They know the times that he's stood off to the side and taken exception to rulings that they did like. They know all of that. That's why they decided, as soon as they saw that Justice Kavanaugh was a Heritage Foundation and Federalist Society approved person, in other words, someone from President Trump's list, that's when they decided, no, not so much. It's a game. Anyone who approaches you and tries to make you think that the Democrats are legitimately under duress because they don't have the opportunity to review millions of documents when they haven't reviewed the 140,000 has been deceived by this information that's being put out there. So when we get back, we will pivot over and we'll talk a little bit about Colin Kaepernick back in the news again, and Nike this time throwing themselves on the sword. Call in if you want, 866-963-2037, 866-963-2037. Be right back.
What does it take to live an uncommon life? Here's former Super Bowl winning coach Tony Dungy with today's uncommon moment.
Your perspective today has a lot to do with what happens tomorrow. So it's vital to make sure your perceptions are positive. Envision your future, your accomplishments and achievements, and your God-given significance. Base it on what you know to be true, of course, not on your own sense of pride or on unhealthy ways to satisfy your needs. But within the values and dreams God has given you, paint a picture of where you want to go, what you want to be like, and what you want to accomplish. With God's help, we can be intentional and choose to envision a life of significance, possibility, and impact.
New York Times best-selling author Tony Dungy. Discover more at CoachDungy.com. That's CoachDungy.com.
This is Just a Minute with Stacey Washington. Well, the Freedom from Religion Foundation is at it again. This time, the anti-liberty group is targeting a cafe offering a 10% discount to any patrons that show a church bulletin. Starters Cafe in Cheviot, Ohio is a growing brunch spot which the owner, Justin Watson, wants to capitalize on. Since the cafe's busiest day is Sunday, offering a church flyer discount has been very popular and is similar to restaurants offering savings to veterans, moms on Mother's Day, dads on Father's Day, senior citizens, and pretty much anyone celebrating a birthday. The Freedom from Religion Foundation likens this marketing genius to whites-only policies, calling it racist. Of course, the go-to for anyone wanting to infringe on the rights of others is to cry racism. Fortunately, Mr. Watson is standing his ground. Perhaps someone will start a foundation to advocate for our freedom from baseless attacks from the Freedom from Religion Foundation. I'm Stacey Washington. Find out more at StaceyOnTheRight.com.
I'm Chad Pergram with the Speaker's Lobby. You won't find the words confirmation hearing anywhere in the Constitution. All the Constitution says is that the President has the power to nominate Supreme Court justices, and the Senate must provide advice and consent. The Senate never held any Supreme Court confirmation hearings until 1916 for Justice Louis Brandeis. Brandeis didn't even attend. Senators didn't meet in person with the Supreme Court nominee until they huddled with Justice Harlan Fiske Stone in 1925. The first modern confirmation hearing came in 1955 for Justice John Marshall Harlan. Every Supreme Court nominee since Harlan has fielded questions from the Judiciary Committee in a hearing. Television ushered in a new model for Supreme Court confirmation hearings. It culminated in October 1991 with dramatic must-watch wall-to-wall televised hearings for Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. Anita Hill accused Thomas of sexual harassment. To keep up with the competition, CBS debated whether it should stick with the hearing or show the baseball playoffs. CBS showed the games, and the ratings for the hearings dwarfed the numbers for the baseball. With the Speaker's Lobby, Chad Pergram, Fox News.
You can watch a live stream of the show on Facebook or YouTube at Stacy on the Right. Now, back to the show on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Whoa. Welcome back to the program. Thank you so much for being with us today. I think I will say for hour two, I have a little bit of blowback that I've received for not joining in with the remonstrations about Senator McCain. And I feel like I've been very respectful, but perhaps some of what I've said has been misconstrued, or maybe it hasn't. I'm not changing my mind on anything, but we'll have to get to that in hour two, because right now I promised that we would go to the phones and talk about this Nike issue. And it's important because it takes a lot to get Americans to pick up a pair of $99 shoes or $100 shoes, $200 shoes, and burn them. It's upset. People are upset about this decision. And so the decision that we're talking about is Nike. They're reviving their Just Do It campaign. Just Do It has remained their motto, and they're going to do another iteration of their very, very successful ad campaign to bring that slogan to new Americans, new consumers who may not be using their products, who may not be buying Nike shoes and socks and apparel. And so in doing so, they have chosen Colin Kaepernick to be one of the individuals, and they're not they're not receiving a good report on that. People are noticeably upset. So let's go to the phones. We have Jacob in Alabama. Thank you so much for calling in today.
How you doing, Sister Tracy?
I'm doing fine.
All right. Yeah, good to hear from you. Hope you had a good holiday.
Yes. Labor Day was nice and restful.
Yeah, that's a good thing, because what you're doing, you're going to need a lot of that, because you're doing an excellent job, and just going to have that balance going on. With Colin Kaepernick, it's just, one thing is really funny. The more you study the Word of God, you see that we're in spiritual warfare, and the devil is just throwing everything he can, anywhere he can, but there's only one thing good. The devil has no new tricks. He only got new people.
Mm. So what are your thoughts on people backlashing against Nike for them choosing Colin Kaepernick to do their ad campaign? He's just one of a group of people.
Yeah, they're supposed to, because what it is like a vote, quote unquote, a vote for Colin Kaepernick is a vote against America. And America was started way back in 1776, 1,000 to 1. We should have never been. We should have been British inhabitants now. God put His hand on this country, and this country belongs to God. And then the vote for Kaepernick is a vote against godliness and God's will for the country. This country doesn't belong to anybody but Him, and it's like the promised land He gives. A lot of blessings in this country. It's the only country you can fall down 10 times, get back up, and still say doing really well. This is a great place. And a vote for Colin Kaepernick is a vote against God in its broader sense, because this is a blessed country. Anybody that goes 1,500 miles across the desert with their kids to get here, they see that this country is blessed. They see the anointing of God is on this country. And anyone that talks against it like that, they're talking against the Lord, because this country's not here because you and I are so good or anybody else in this country is so good. This is a blessing and the grace of God why this country is functioning and the whole world wants to get here.
It's true. And I'm just, my concern for Colin Kaepernick, I genuinely feel a sense of sadness for him, because what has happened is he kind of bit off more than he could chew in the protest movement. He started it, and he consequentially is the face of this whole protest thing with the kneeling. And because he started it, and he's not even in it anymore. Like, since he's not a football player, he can't even go on the field and protest anymore to kind of carry it on. But those who are carrying it on are doing so because they feel like they, quote unquote, support Colin Kaepernick, when the truth is he has completely destroyed his brand. For a company to lose 3% of their stock value, a huge, multinational company like Nike, a company that really has this huge, following in this country, and they're very profitable, for them to lose 3% of their value just because he's a part of the ad campaign points to a really, really sad truth about his brand and what he's able to do. He can't do, he can't be the cereal guy. He can't have, time where he's doing basically anything. And I think that's so sad. And not because I agree with what he did. I obviously disagree with him kneeling in front of the American flag. The only time I see it justified to kneel when the flag is present is when a person who is on active duty, who is serving on the U.S. Air Force Honor Guard, U.S. Army Honor Guard, et cetera, and you are at a burial, and that person that is being buried is a veteran, and they have the flag draped across their coffin. The 6 individuals who are pallbearing will fold that flag, and then one of them will present the flag to the designated family member. And when they do so, because the family member is seated, they kneel to one. You take a knee. I've done this before. You take a knee, but your knee doesn't actually touch the ground. You just basically crouch down, and then you take the flag, which you're holding over your heart with 2 hands, and you lower it into their hands, and then you stand up and you go back so that you can finish, which is the 21 gun salute. That's the only time I think you should kneel. Citizens don't kneel, we stand. We've fought too many wars. We've had too many of our good American citizens of all backgrounds felled on the battlefield in foreign lands. Too many of them, we've lost them, and they've given their lives for the right for us to stand as citizens. So does that mean I don't think we should protest? Oh, please. I'm a proponent of the First Amendment. We should protest. I believe that if you want to protest something, you are so welcome to do so, and sometimes we have to use the parameters that are given to us. Oftentimes nowadays, if you want to do an organized protest, you need a permit. So, I mean, I know that's annoying, but that is to make sure that people aren't harmed by oncoming traffic and things like that. It makes sense if you think about it. And so in that aspect, you absolutely have the right to protest. What is happening here is people aren't saying that people don't have the right to protest. People are saying that if you're going to connect your protest to your workplace, don't be surprised if people who disagree with you utilize your workplace to make a statement back to you. And I think that's so weird that people don't understand that. This isn't about Colin not having the right to do so. It's about the consequences that came from him exercising his right to defy his employer. He's now unemployable. He's going to have to start his own business or work for someone else, and it can't be in the public eye unless he goes to work for an advocacy organization that actually believes the same things he believes. And it's funny that none of those organizations have hired him. So, Denise, let's go to Denise in Alabama. Thank you for calling into the show.
Hello. I was calling because I do not feel that what you are stating about Colin Kaepernick is fair. Okay. Just because he may not get sponsorship from other people who do not believe in what he believes in does not mean that what he is doing is wrong. His initial protest regarding the anthem had nothing to do with the anthem. If you recall, and he has continuously stated, it is related to the unjust treatment by some African Americans, by some police officers, not all, toward African Americans as far as being racially profiled. That was his protest. He chose to kneel related to that.
Absolutely.
It was not related to the flag. It was not related to the national anthem.
But he chose to do it during those things.
A lot of people chose to investigate the background of the national anthem and found out that the original words in the national anthem were related to slavery and also had words that were related to oppressing people and keeping them as slaves. So now there are many reasons to protest the actual anthem, but that was not his protest, and what he is doing, regardless of if he ever makes another dime in his life, is the right thing to do. Okay. Sometimes you have to stand up for right. And for that other person that just was on there to say that America is what blessed by God, yes, they were. But in 1776, black people were still slaves. But again, that has nothing to do with the reason why Colin Kaepernick was kneeling. He was kneeling in reverence to pray about the state of America.
On his workplace.
In America is
so
not great.
I appreciate what you're saying, Denise. I do. And please don't let her go just yet, because I do have a question for you. So
yes, ma'am.
In what you said he has the right to protest and that the protest was centered around police brutality and that he was kneeling
Correct.
in prayer. But was he doing that in his off time or was he doing that on the job?
He was doing it on the job, and
okay.
he did it for a good reason.
So no, I have a second question.
I
have a second question. So, do you have a job? Do you work?
Are you not doing what you're doing on the job?
No, I'm not.
I'm not. What you're stating on your job.
No, Denise, this is my work and this is my opinion. But I was hired to work here.
So
no, he wasn't hired to work there to do activism. He was hired to do football. And I'm not hired to do football on this show. Denise, if I chose to do football on this radio time, I would be let go. If I chose to make a statement about a political activity by doing football during my 2 hours where I'm supposed to do radio, I would be let go as well. The issue is not whether or not he was, doing something that he could or couldn't do, or it was his opinion. The issue is he chose his work hours where he was being paid to play a game and represent a team to do political activism. So just like you can't go to your job and do political activism, and if your boss tells you to stop, you can't stay on working there if they fire you, I can't do football during my radio time. I'm paid to give this opinion. I'm paid to talk about all of these political issues, and not for my opinion to be one way or the other, but that I'm to give my opinion during this radio time.
It is one way.
It is absolutely.
And you boast about the fact that it's one way.
Absolutely, Denise. If you think for 1 second I'm backing down on what I believe or that I'm paid to because of what I believe, yes and no. I am sitting here because I have a biblical worldview, but my opinions are my own. They have been such, and you can Google it, 36 million hits, I think, at the last time I did it, on how many times I've expressed these opinions. They are my opinions. I'm paid to give them here because I give them well. I provide a radio program
and
that millions of people listen to. But he wasn't. He worked at activism when he was supposed to be working at football. And I appreciate you calling in. I think it's great that you have your opinion, but I'm not going to overtalk this because it's not the same thing. And if you can't understand that you absolutely cannot defy your workplace, you can't say to your boss, well, I'm Stacy on the right, but I'm also going to be Stacy on the ice skating during this time. I'm going to put on a program all about ice skating. I'm going to do a program about clothing options and the best shoes to wear. At some point, my boss is going to say, so we do Christian commentary, we do Christian teaching and preaching, we do politics. The show about the latest pair of cowgirl boots you've bought or how many, shops you've gone to so you can refurbish your house or do chairs, that's not going to work here. And if I kept doing it, I couldn't say, well, you're letting me go because I'm black. I'd have to say, you're letting me go because I'm not adhering to the contract. Colin Kaepernick was not paid to do political commentary or activism, and that is why he was let go. And anyone who acts as if they don't understand that their job has certain parameters isn't dealing with the truth as it lies. As far as these comments about how blacks were slaves in 1776, yeah, that's the history. That is the compromise that was made so that they could form a union. If you read up on what was going on, they didn't want that, but the southern states would only agree to come into the union so that they could be strong enough to go up against Great Britain if that was the case. Now we are no longer slaves, and I don't live in the past. I'm descended from slaves. And I don't live in the past. I actually live in the victory that is mine today as an American citizen, someone who served this country. I've been abroad. I've seen what it's like to be black in Saudi Arabia, black in Russia, back when it was the USSR, black in France, black in Spain, black in almost every country in Western Europe. Austria. The only place I haven't been to is Australia and China. And, of course, Africa. I've never been to actual Africa. Unbelievable that we as black people would ever allow anyone to denigrate our history here. We are a proud nation of people who once enslaved one another, who now work together equal under the law. And so, living in the past yields you no results. Living in the present, looking forward to the future, that is what God has for us. And so I totally agree with the first caller. And I'm sorry, I do not agree with Denise. And I also repudiate the assertion that somehow I'm paid to say the things that I'm saying. I've been saying them since I was unpaid. I was on the radio doing hours of radio every week, filling in for hosts, and also on my own weekend show until I got my own advertising. I was doing that show for free, and I was presenting these same opinions. They're mine, and there's no way I'm going to ever let anybody come on and say that they're not. As far as Colin Kaepernick, it's not really my opinion as to whether or not he's employable. Nike stock is down. Now they have to make a decision about whether or not they're going to keep him on the ad campaign or continue to lose revenue. And that's all that matters right here. Employers care much about what you do and your opinion, but they care more about the bottom line. The NFL is not in business to do activism. They're in business to promote football, to show football, and to get Americans to watch football, to get businesses to advertise for football. That is why the NFL exists, to enrich the owners, the players, and all of the vendors. That's why they're there. Why am I here? I'm here to present the biblical worldview and to talk politics and culture, not to play football or to do ice skating or to talk about decorating. That's what it is. We'll be back with Hour 2, where we will talk about George Soros right after this.
Urban Family Talk.
I'm Will Addison, Director of Urban Family Talk. Do you believe that we are living in the last days? In the culture we live in today, and dare I say even in our church culture, we are guilty of not looking towards Christ's return, but are in fact bogged down with the cares of this world. Do you find yourself more concerned about this world than you are about the world to come? Be encouraged to live as if Christ is coming back today. Stay connected at urbanfamilytalk.com.
Truth, wisdom, empowerment. Urban Family Talk, a ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Steve Pugh. Democrats on the Senate Judiciary Committee cried foul as the confirmation hearing got underway for U.S. Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh. Rachel Sutherland has more.
Judge Kavanaugh's confirmation hearing started off with fireworks.
We're not in executive session.
Mr. Chairman, I ask for a roll call vote on my motion to adjourn.
Senator Richard Blumenthal asking to put an end to the hearing as Democrats on the Senate Judiciary Committee interrupted Republican Chair Chuck Grassley's opening statement, and protesters were escorted out by police. Democrats want more documents on the career of Judge Kavanaugh, and they've been blasting a 2009 law review article in which Kavanaugh wrote criminal investigations should be deferred while a U.S. president is in office. In Washington, Rachel Sutherland, Fox News.
It's primary day in Massachusetts.
Popular Massachusetts Governor Charlie Baker, a Republican, facing a primary challenge from a conservative candidate and minister, Scott Lively, while 3 Republicans are fighting to take on Democratic Senator Elizabeth Warren.
The Trump administration rolls back worker protections.
An open critic of President Trump who's been mocking her as Pocahontas. But some of the most closely watched races are for House seats some see as a test of direction for the Democratic Party. In one, 20-year incumbent Mike Capuano, challenged by Ayanna Pressley, the first black woman to serve on the Boston City Council. Also running for spots in the mostly male, all-white Democratic congressional delegation, a female Muslim African-American lawyer, and a female game developer. Lillian Wu, Fox News.
A lawsuit involving a Tennessee cemetery where remains were mishandled is due to go to trial today. More from Tanya J. Powers.
Opening statements are set for today in the trial of Galilee Memorial Gardens, a Memphis, Tennessee cemetery where caskets were crushed and stacked and bodies were lost. The cemetery closed in 2014, but the fight over who should pay for those actions is what's at issue in a case that dates back to 2010. Investigators say the cemetery's owners misplaced hundreds of bodies, buried multiple cadavers in the same grave, and crushed caskets to fit them into single plots for years. The lawsuit seeks damages likely ranging in the millions of dollars if a jury sides with the families. Tanya J. Powers, Fox News.
An Indiana pro-family activist says President Trump's popularity in the Hoosier state is playing a major role in the highly contested Senate race there. Chad Groening has more.
Last week, the president held a rousing rally in Evansville, Indiana, to help Republican senatorial candidate Mike Braun, who's trying to unseat Democrat Joe Donnelly in a state the president carried by 19 percentage points in 2016. But despite the state's deep red hue, Donnelly led Braun by 12 points in a recent statewide poll. Micah Clark is executive director of the American Family Association of Indiana. He says Donnelly has done a good job of fooling Hoosier voters.
Joe Donnelly is actually running commercials that are positive with Donald Trump in them. He's not attacking Trump. He's showing where President Trump praised him one time on a medical bill at a bill signing ceremony a couple of years ago. So Donnelly's running ads as the Democrat trying to link himself to Donald Trump. Mike Braun is also.
Clark hopes Trump's endorsement of Braun and his appearance in Evansville help remind voters that Donnelly has a D after his name.
I think what voters need to know is that you're voting for the party as much as you are voting for the candidate, because the candidate is beholden to the party. And in this case, it is Chuck Schumer that Joe Donnelly is beholden to. So I think that's a problem for Joe Donnelly. I don't think he wants people to know the extreme liberalism of his party.
Clark hopes that Trump's recent rally and hopefully future campaign rallies in Indiana will fire up the conservative base to get to the polls on Election Day. I'm Chad Groening.
And finally, 2 potential hurricanes could make landfall this week.
Tropical storm Gordon is forecast to intensify to a minimum hurricane before making landfall near Mississippi tonight before midnight. Heavy rain will accompany Gordon along its track, spreading an extensive swath of 3 to 6 inches with locally higher amounts. Severe thunderstorms will also be likely over parts of the Gulf Coast, and we are also watching Tropical Storm Florence in the Atlantic with several tropical waves that could also develop off the coast of Africa. I'm Janice Dean, Fox News.
For American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh.
Family is an institution set forth by God, one man and one woman for life, with the outflow being children produced by that union. It's obvious to all that there is an attack on the family in our country, and especially on fathers. Whether it's the cycle of sin that persists in our families or the pressure from our government to exclude men from being intimately involved, the strategic battle is on for the souls of men. Join us in the battle to strengthen fatherhood. UrbanFamilyTalk.com.
She's sharp, pointed, and insightful. This is Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
It'll never be enough. I mean, as someone said famously over the weekend, how many documents do you need before you go ahead and vote no? Is this going to be 51-49?
You know, I don't know. I'm going to vote yes, because the people of Texas want a strong, principled constitutionalist who will defend our fundamental liberties, who will defend free speech, who will defend religious liberty, who will defend the Second Amendment.
Of all the financial titans and philanthropists of the 20th century, none are more complex or mysterious than George Soros. He amassed billions through ruthless business decisions. He can move world financial markets simply by voicing an opinion, or destabilize a government by buying and selling its currency.
I am basically there to make money. I cannot and do not look at the social consequences of what I do. I don't feel guilty because I'm engaged in an amoral activity which is not meant to have anything to do with guilt.
And now, Stacy Washington.
Oh my goodness, welcome back to the show, which I am paid to do. Thank you for being here today. I want to point everybody to @StacyOnTheRight on Twitter and Instagram. I spent some time this morning as I was preparing for the show and kind of getting back into things because I really unplugged over the weekend. I spent some time just kind of listening to the hearings for Justice Kavanaugh, and man, that was something else. So we covered that first hour. The podcasts are at afr.net and also urbanfamilytalk.com. So don't forget, if you ever need to listen to something, you can go there. We also have the live streams that stay up all over the place. So, you can find it anywhere, and I encourage you to do so. Thanks for being here today. Happy Tuesday, Monday on a Tuesday. Awesome. And I want to now talk about this George Soros business. So first of all, I'm going to come clean. I had no idea that George Soros gave money to help countries as well as the political activism and the kind of currency domination things that he does. So he's a complex figure, as most individuals are who have the kind of wealth that he has. So the story here is a lot of people on the left think that George Soros is a bit of a hero because he funds a lot of organizations that advance lefty causes. And then on the right, a lot of people view him as basically, from that movie with Kathy Bates, the Debo. He's just evil and, there's just no good in him. What I found in looking and listening to a lot of different programming in which he gave interviews himself, so listening to his own words, is that he is a cold, calculating individual, but he would have to be one of the richest people on the planet. The question is, how does he get that money? So Friday, we listened to some audio from Dinesh D'Souza, where he's done a lot of the heavy lifting, the deep, deep research on George Soros and what he's done in certain countries, certain markets, manipulation of currencies, etc., and then how he uses those profits to operate within the United States. But he doesn't sell any of the securities or anything in the U.S. because he doesn't want to abide by our regulations, which, I'm often talking about reducing regulation, but thank God we have the Securities and Exchange Commission to set up rules for how we can trade here and what's illegal and what's not. Because of those rules, he chooses not to operate within our country. Financially, he can't do the same things that he does in other countries. That being said, he has done some significant work on purchasing attorneys general's races in a number of different areas across the country because he feels that having the attorneys general be individuals that are approved by him is policy that can actually be more impactful than, say, having House of Representative members of Congress that are elected from those same areas. That's pretty telling in and of itself as well. So let's first listen to how he tanks world currencies. And this is all information that I got from mainstream outlets. And the interview with Dinesh D'Souza that we played on Friday, that was also, he was on, I believe he was on Fox News. You can find that clip online as well. I'll put the links in for those onto the Facebook page, so you can look at these for yourself and you can watch the videos from his 60 Minutes interviews, etc. And you can watch his face, because oftentimes listening to the interviews here on the show, it's helpful, but if you want to actually look at his face and see what he looked like when he said these things, that's pretty instructive too. So first he talks about tanking world currencies. It's number one.
Right now, his Quantum Group hedge fund moves $14 billion of rich investors' money around the world every day, looking for profits and answering to no one. Soros makes huge bets on whole countries and economies. Last year, when he saw cracks in the Asia boom, he began selling the currency in Thailand. Traders in Hong Kong followed suit, triggering a financial crisis that plunged much of Asia into a depression.
In the last 2 years, you've been blamed for financial collapse of Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, Japan, and Russia.
All of the above.
All of the above.
Yeah.
Are you that powerful?
No, I think there's a great misunderstanding.
The Prime Minister of Malaysia said that the region spent 40 years trying to build up its economy, and along comes a moron like Soros with a lot of money, and it's all over. He called you a criminal.
It's easier for him to blame an outside force than to admit that they were mismanaging their economy and their currency. The French finance minister talked about hanging speculators from lampposts.
Okay, so in this audio bit, he basically deflects criticism of his activities because in his mind, if he doesn't make the money, someone else will. So if he sees an opportunity in a country that is poorly managing their currency or their markets, and it's an opportunity for him to make a lot of money, he's going to take that opportunity, and he doesn't feel that you can call him a moron, you can call him the devil, you can say whatever you want about him, call him evil. He doesn't have any qualms about it because if he didn't do it, someone else would. And in his mind, he should do it. He should earn the money, reap the benefits, and then take that money and exercise it to move pieces around on the playing board the way that he thinks they should go, because in his mind, he really is the best person to make those decisions. Now, you may disagree, but he would say, well, then where are your billions? Because if you had billions as I do, then you could sit with me and we could make these decisions. As he does with world leaders. He actually goes to world leaders and sits with them and gives them advice on what to do with their markets. So here he is talking about when he was a kid, and he was raised in this affluent family, and they were Jewish. And then the father, who, I mean, he did very well. He kind of saw the handwriting on the wall. He saw that Jewish families would not be able to live in peace and prosperity as they had done, and they were going to be negative things happening. He wasn't exactly sure all of it, but he knew something was on the pipeline. So he got his family out. With George, he found a benefactor who was German to claim George as his own, to say it was his nephew, and to take care of him so that he wouldn't be taken away. If Jews were taken away, George wouldn't be among them. So the family was broken up. And that is when George was going around with this benefactor, and they were confiscating the property of Jewish people, and George Soros was there. Listen to what he says. There's two of these audio bits about this. Just listen to this. It's number 2.
To understand the complexities and contradictions in his personality, you have to go back to the very beginning, to Budapest, where George Soros was born 68 years ago, to parents who were wealthy, well-educated, and Jewish. When the Nazis occupied Budapest in 1944, George Soros' father was a successful lawyer. He lived on an island in the Danube and liked to commute to work in a rowboat. But knowing there were problems ahead for the Jews, he decided to split his family up. He bought them forged papers, and he bribed a government official to take 14-year-old George Soros in and swear that he was his Christian godson. But survival carried a heavy price tag. While hundreds of thousands of Hungarian Jews were being shipped off to the death camps, George Soros accompanied his phony godfather on his appointed rounds, confiscating property from the Jews. These are pictures from 1944 of what happened to George Soros's friends and neighbors.
And so you're probably thinking, oh, well, you know, what could he do? What could he do? 14? So if he was 12 or 9 or 8, okay, but he was 14 years old. He could have said, Dad, I don't want to stay with this man. He's confiscating property from Jewish people. I mean, you would think there'd be something that he could have done. And even if he couldn't have done anything, even if he was forced to continue to do that, and that was a part of his life, then he could have said, I regret that deeply. I was 14. I had nowhere else to go. And so I did it. But I didn't do it because I thought it was right or I wanted to, but I had to eat. I had to live with this man, not his nephew, his godson. I was playing a role. I knew if I didn't, I'd be in amongst those same people they weren't just having their stuff confiscated, they were being carted off. But he doesn't say that. In fact, we're gonna listen to number 3. He says he had no guilt about the confiscated property. He had no guilt whatsoever, because just like he says when he tanks foreign markets, if I didn't do it, someone else would. He said if he didn't help, someone else would have done it. So it really is a net 0 on the morality scale. It's number 3.
My understanding is that you went out with this protector of yours who swore that you were his adopted godson.
Yes.
Went out, in fact, and helped in the confiscation of property from the Jews.
That's right.
I mean, that sounds like an experience that would send lots of people to the psychiatric couch for many, many years. Was it difficult?
Not at all. Not at all. Maybe as a child you don't see the connection, but it created no problem at all.
No feeling of guilt.
No.
For example, that I'm Jewish, And here I am watching these people go. I could just as easily be there. I should be there. None of that.
Well, of course, I could be on the other side, or I could be the one from whom the thing is being taken away. But there was no sense that I shouldn't be there, because that was, well, actually, funny way, it's just like in markets, that if I weren't there, of course I wasn't doing it, but somebody else would be taking it away anyhow. In other words, whether I was there or not, I was only a spectator, the property was being taken away. So I had no role in taking away that property. So I had no sense of guilt.
You hear how I cleaned that up? He took a second to think it through and realized he'd just admitted to confiscating property from fellow Jewish people. And so he cleaned it up. He said he was there, but he had no role in taking it. He did have a role. He has admitted in other interviews that he actually would go around since he was a 14-year-old boy, and Jewish people didn't actually suspect him of being a part of the Nazi movement. He would go and he would kind of scout it out and say, he'd go back and tell his protector, they have this and they have that. I heard them talking about maybe slipping away because they're scared. They think something might happen to them. He took to the role readily, which goes back to his original family, the dad who bought him the papers and all of that. What kind of people were they? What kind of morals did they raise him with that he had no qualms whatsoever? Or maybe he did have qualms, and now he's just erased those, because in order to cope with what he did, he can either be repentant about it and basically accept blame, which would make him, a part of the problem, or he can say, it's just like with markets. Anyone can take advantage of failing markets, and that's what I did, only I wasn't a part of it. I didn't actually take anything, but he also was not asked by his questioner. These softball interviews, that's why they're a problem. The questioner should have said, when you say you didn't have a role, you mean you took part in none of it. You didn't report on people. You didn't share information about what people had. You didn't do anything to help your protector. It's kind of hard to believe at 14 years old, the protector's dragging him around to confiscate stuff from people, and he didn't have to pick anything up, touch anything, say anything. He did nothing. He just stood around like a lump. He was like a pole standing there, like a light pole. That doesn't pass the smell test. But this is why he gets this reputation of being so evil. That's why people use the word evil, because this is when he was 14. So if he was able to do that at 14 and accept it and really never feel any remorse over it, what is he capable of today? Well, we'll get into that. We have one more segment about this, and we'll take your calls. Call lines are open, 866-963-2037. I have a little bit more for you on George Soros. And then I leave it up to you to catch all of the fantastic documentaries from Dinesh D'Souza. He's the leading expert on this, I feel. We'll be right back.
80% of the time, an abortion-minded mother who views an ultrasound or sonogram of her baby will choose life. Here's the story of Candace.
The sonogram sealed the deal for me. My baby was like this tiny little spectrum of hope. And I saw his heart beating on the screen. And knowing that there's life growing inside, that sonogram changed my life. I went from just Candace to Mom. Thank you to everybody that has given these gifts. You guys are giving more than money. You guys are giving love.
There are currently preborn centers which do not have an ultrasound machine. Would you sponsor a machine today? Dial pound 250 and say keyword baby. That's pound 250 and say baby. Or go to preborn.com. That's preborn.com. Your love could save a life.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson. A recent study in the journal Lancet concludes that there is no safe level of alcohol consumption. This seems to contradict some other studies that argue that there were possible benefits to moderate use of alcohol. Now, the researchers looked at data from 28 million people worldwide. That allowed them to compare the few benefits of alcohol consumption that might be preventative for conditions like ischemic heart disease and diabetes to the increased risk of cancers and other diseases. The authors suggest that public health organizations consider recommendations for abstention. The conclusions of the research paper have been challenged at a number of levels. For example, the increase of risk is slight for one drink a day, but increases significantly for someone drinking more than that. That is why some critics challenge the abstention recommendation. They remind us that there is no safe level for driving, but the government doesn't recommend people avoid driving. But it is worth repeating that the study concludes that no level of alcohol consumption improves health, and we are all aware of people who promise themselves and others that they will only have one drink and end up having many more. Another question is whether the study considered all the factors. Did they miss a confounding variable? A famous example was the erroneous conclusion from one study that coffee caused pancreatic cancer. The authors did not adjust for the fact that coffee drinkers are more likely to smoke. It was smoking that killed people, not coffee. But it does appear that researchers did take into account such data. This study illustrates once again that alcohol consumption is a global health issue where the risks outweigh the few possible benefits. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kirby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
All right, we're back. Thank you so much for being here today. And oh my goodness, I'm seeing people commenting about the Soros information, that he didn't have, a conscience and all of that. And it's hard to know. If for a little bit of perspective, I stopped for a second and I thought to myself, well, wait a minute. What were you like when you were 14? I can't find any way to correlate what I was like at 14 to what he's describing that he participated in. But I just like, you want to try to figure it out, right? You think about what he's saying and you want to try to understand. And so you think back, you're like, well, I wasn't like that, but maybe it was the time he was living in, watching all of those people getting, carted away and knowing it couldn't be for good because their stuff was being confiscated. Because if the Nazis were really not going to do anything bad to the Jewish people that they carted away, they would have left their homes intact and left all their stuff there because the people that you're carting away will be back. When you cart people off in railway cars and they're crying and they're literally, they're being abducted, and then you let your jackbooted thugs go in and confiscate their property or take it from them and then let them get hauled away, the inference there is that people aren't coming back. When someone gives your stuff away, that's a real huge red flag. So I wonder, did he just say, this is where my dad placed me, I don't have any choice, this is what I have to do, and so he just did it, and then now, because he did that, it opened the door to so much more activity that most of us would find repugnant? I am not against people who have earned a lot of money, taking their money and donating it to different causes to try to, impact things in one way or the other. That is one of the blessings of working hard, praying over your work, and earning a lot of money. But not every person who earns a lot of money and is rich is morally sound. And we know that. And so, we have to work against that. You have to work against individuals who try to change things for the bad. And you try to support individuals who are changing things for the good. This is the world we live in. But it's interesting to hear him talk this way. Like, I just don't know, after doing that, that I could, after doing that, like taking stuff from people and knowing what happened to them, and then later knowing what, it's almost as if you're listening to him talk about this a couple of years after he took the stuff. Not now, where decades have passed, and now we know exactly what happened to his countrymen who were hauled away, who he helped take the stuff. They were tortured. They were gassed. Some of them had their skin and body parts made into other things. They were treated like lab animals. And not only that, but the murder, the murder and the torture, the starvation, the conditions that they were subjected to before they were killed, and then the way they were desecrated afterwards, just thrown into group graves, just it's barbarism on a scale that is hard to comprehend. And then you hear him talking about it. And so I never have, like, so far over these past few days since when I first heard it, I haven't been able to make peace with it. I don't believe that as a 14-year-old, and I had my moments, that I could have done what he did and then later, in my later years, be like, well, if I didn't do it, somebody else would have. So I don't get it. I tried to understand, but I didn't get it. And, you know, it's not right. And so here he is. He's admitting to being a Nazi collaborator and denying it all in the same breath. It's crazy pants. It's number 4.
George Soros, in a way, is Donald Trump without the humility.
One of your money manager told us that, George really does think he's a god.
I mean, if you think that you're God and you go into financial markets, you're bound to come out broke. So the fact that I'm not broke shows that I don't believe that I'm God.
So he hates Donald Trump so much, this interviewer does, that he says, you're like Donald Trump without the humility, without the, No, he's not. Again, when has Donald Trump ever in his life, or any of his family members, since they had to go back and trace his lineage all the way back to the little island where his mother came from, when have any of those people, Drumps or Trumps, ever killed anyone or confiscated property from anyone? They have been capitalists, they have been business owners, they have been immigrants, but they have never harmed anyone in the way that he's discussing. I know there's some stories about, the vendors who were unpaid on projects and things like that. And those vendors had the recourse of, you file a claim or you sue a person, and then you can, get a judge to adjudicate against them to get the money that you're owed paid back. And that is an unfortunate way to have to be paid as a vendor. And I don't agree with that. I don't know the truth of those stories. I've read them. I don't know if Donald Trump was in the right for not paying them. The work was shoddy. They breached the contract, or if it was that he owed them money and he didn't pay and they were, working to get paid. I don't know. But even if he's guilty of all the things he's ever been accused of, he's never done that, where he literally helped Nazis take property from Jewish people. Oh, by the way, he's Jewish too. So I won't be that one. Maybe he'll come to know the Lord. I don't know. I've as much of the audio and videos that I watched to get those few little clips together, and I watched them and I listened and I was like, man, what is, like, I just don't get it. I do not get George Soros and what he is. And a lot of people in the comments are saying, I knew right from wrong at 14 and that he was just greedy. And I tend to agree with that. Like, we have 14-year-olds. Well, we had a 14-year-old. She's 15 now. And the 2 older kids were once 14. My husband was once 14. I was once 14. I know a lot of other people who have 14-year-old kids. 14-year-olds have the capacity to know right from wrong. You are in the age in which you can be held accountable for your own actions as far as, sin, not sin, obedience, not obedient. He definitely does not hold himself accountable for what he participated in. And we don't know more details because the interviewers never seem to ask him, did your protector make you do this? These are the kind of things that if I had the chance to interview him, I would say, look, I'm kind of baffled by the way you've described this. Can you tell us about what it was like? I know it was a long time ago, but did your protector, who you're living with him, you owe him because you're living with him, did he make you do these things, right? Did he tell you do these things, or you're going along with your people because we all know who you are, or your father paid me to take care of you, but in order for me to do that, you have to do certain things? He never even says that. And in some ways, the fact that he doesn't say that he doesn't volunteer that information, shows that he really doesn't feel any remorse about what he participated in. And that is it's just like, I don't even know how to I can't, people. So I said I would share with you, and there was so much more. I didn't want to do more than 2 segments on it. And we'll take your calls. If you have comments about this, this thing going on here with George Soros and his truth It's 866-963-2037, 866-963-2037. We know, as far as the rest of it is concerned, George Soros has been very, very open with his desire to kind of lessen this whole, individual liberty, Constitution, all these rights and freedoms we have here in America. He's not really down with those. And so one of the things that I thought was interesting is that in countries that are smaller than ours, that in some ways a tiny country has a lot more to lose than we do, because we have not just our military might, but there's the strength that comes from being a nation of over 300 million people. And of course, we have two coasts, which is, well, obviously we have the Gulf, but I'm talking about, we're not hemmed in by countries on all sides. We really have an optimal situation, which is God's providence for our country, in where we're located, the kind of resources that are present on our landmass, our population size, and our, economy, economic might, military might, etc. Other countries don't have those same advantages, and they've had to really fight Soros off the same way we would fight off an aggressor who was trying to take us over militarily. And one of those countries is Hungary. Now, Hungary's been very open about not wanting Soros to meddle in their affairs. And one of the things that they did was they went into great lengths, like this is a current story, to squash or quash Soros founded and funded universities, where he funds a university and then the university teaches ideals that he approves of. This is in Budapest, Hungary. This is next week, as in this story is from September 4th. Today's September 4th. Next week, 1,500 students from more than 100 countries will converge in the heart of the regal city on the Danube, Budapest, to prepare for classes at a university that enjoys respect among Hungarian academics, top international rankings, and it is accredited in America. It has American accreditation. The only thing Central European University lacks is assurance that this year's back-to-school rush in Budapest won't be its last. The university's right to admit new students expires in January, and a hostile Hungarian government shows no sign of granting a reprieve. We've been taken hostage. This is a quote from Michael Ignatieff, a Canadian human rights scholar and former politician who, as the university's president, may soon have to lead its retreat into exile. I don't want to do that, he says, but we're coming up to crunch time. This is unprecedented. Most European Union nations don't even have a precedent or a law or anything like that that allows them to expel an entire university. But Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban's favorite boogeyman, George Soros, is the founder of Central European University. So Orban has a campaign to dismantle Europe's multicultural, tolerant liberalism and cement a culture that is unapologetically Christian, conservative, and nationalist. Now, before we start picking sides here, it is Hungary's right to be a liberal, multicultural, tolerant nation, or if the people of Hungary want to have an unapologetically Christian, conservative, nationalist country, that is their right as well. Notice that when liberals get on their soapboxes, they'll tell you in a heartbeat, you can't have a student group that's unapologetically Christian. But if you say, we have a student group that's unapologetically LGBT, they're like, more power to you. That's tolerance. Do you see how that works? It's the same double standard they're applying to the whole hearings to confirm Justice Kavanaugh. The Constitution and the Federalist Papers are awesome if they can use it to bludgeon someone they don't think is a good nominee, which, by the way, that happened. That happened today. A Democrat was quoting from the Federalist Papers. I thought the apocalypse was nigh. I started making myself a pumpkin spice latte because I thought I was going on up. I mean, I'm honestly, a Democrat was quoting the Federalist Papers today in her opposition to Justice Kavanaugh. Yeah. And Dianne Feinstein was actually making the argument that you have to be able to change the Constitution in order to adjust to these wonderful advancements that have occurred in technology surrounding firearms. And so you have to be able to change the Constitution. She also believes simultaneously in her same brain that you cannot change the Constitution because the Constitution finds that there's a right for women to abort their unborn babies. She holds those two thoughts at the same time, even though they contradict. Either the Constitution is inviolable, and if there's a constitutional right to abortion, then there is a constitutional right to keep and bear arms, and there it is. or the right to abortion that was found to be constitutional, not in the Constitution, but constitutional by a Supreme Court sitting at that time, can be adjusted after learning that technology shows that unborn babies feel pain and that abortion is a violent death for them that causes them excruciating agony, and that they are indeed human beings because science proves that we procreate after our own kind. Humans make baby humans, and therefore, even though the human may be attached to its mother and inside of a womb, it is still a human being. Scientific advancements prove that for us. Don't tell Dianne Feinstein. So back to this. You've got this, he's a Hungarian prime minister, and he wants to see his nation back on a more traditional footing, and he doesn't feel that Soros and his university are beneficial to that. He says that one of Soros's plots is a plan to create a mixed population in Europe. He doesn't agree with that. He won a landslide re-election in April, and now he's blitzing against gender studies programs, which are a waste of the parents' money. He's blitzing against an attempt to take over scientific research funding. And Soros is pushing to remake the nation's literary canon. Because, you know, if you change the books that a nation reads and you change the history that's in the books that they read, then you can change the way a nation of people thinks about themselves and sees the world. Soros knows this. That's why he set up a university there. He thinks they're ripe for a takeover. And this new prime minister says, we ain't ripe. We're not having it. No thanks. You need to go. So his ambitions for a cultural revolution extend beyond his nation's borders across Europe. This new prime minister, Orban, proclaimed in a speech at a July Youth Festival that he sees a chance to wave goodbye to liberal democracy, and with it, a generation of intellectual and artistic elites who advance the ideology of multiculturalism and adaptable family models. Now, remember, these adaptable family models don't yield the best educated, most stable children. So again, whether you're okay with his, kind of lambasting multiculturalism, I believe what he's saying is he wants Hungarians to be Hungarian. So he's not really concerned about what your background is. It's that if you're in Hungary, you want to be a citizen of the nation of Hungary. And this is a primary concern for any nation that wishes to remain economically viable and sound. So it's not about whether or not people are white or black here in America. I know that has been the constant refrain against President Trump, is that he's some kind of racist because he wants Americans to be American. It's about Americans being American because French, they only consider the French to be French in France. You need to be of French ancestry. Anyone else who lives there is just a third country national. In America, when you come here, if you get citizenship, you're an American. You don't have to hyphenate yourself. You can just call yourself an American. This is a fundamental difference that's important, and I understand what this prime minister is trying to do. We'll be back with more right after this.
What does it take to live an uncommon life? Here's former Super Bowl winning coach Tony Dungy with today's uncommon moment.
Your perspective today has a lot to do with what happens tomorrow, so it's vital to make sure your perceptions are positive. Envision your future, your accomplishments and achievements, and your God-given significance. Base it on what you know to be true, of course, not on your own sense of pride or on unhealthy ways to satisfy your needs. But within the values and dreams God has given you, paint a picture of where you want to go, what you want to be like, and what you want to accomplish. With God's help, we can be intentional and choose to envision a life of significance, possibility, and impact.
New York Times best-selling author Tony Dungy. Discover more at CoachDungy.com. That's CoachDungy.com.
Hi, this is Steve Tiber with 8 Days of Hope. Hurricane Harvey was the second worst disaster ever seen on American soil. 8 Days of Hope responded to that need in Houston, Texas, back in March, where 4,700 volunteers came from all over the world in all 50 states to love and serve people in need. When we left, we realized that there was still much more to do. So many people still were hurting, hundreds of thousands of families looking for somebody, anybody to help them. Here's your chance. 8 Days of Hope 16 will be back in Southeast Houston October 13th through October 20th. It's free. We provide the food and lodging. We're looking for skilled professionals, people who are semi-skilled, and people with no skills or less skilled and want to give back. For more information, you go to our website, 8daysofhope.com. We're expecting about 2,500 volunteers from all over America to go back to Houston to love and serve those in need. Hope to see you in Houston. 8daysofhope.com for more information. 8daysofhope.com.
Donald Trump's America.
President Trump is in a war of words with the leader of the nation's largest labor union. Richard Trumka is president of the AFL-CIO. On Fox News Sunday, he reacted to the president's tweet saying a new North American trade agreement could proceed without Canada.
The three countries in North America, the economy is pretty integrated. And it's pretty hard to see how that would work without having Canada in the deal.
Trumka says he's not even sure Mexico's end was set in stone.
Because the language isn't drafted, we haven't seen whole chapters of the thing.
Trumka went on to dispute the president's claim of being the champion of American workers.
The scale is weighted against him because he's done more to hurt workers than to help workers.
The president tweeted on Labor Day about record lows in unemployment and that workers are prospering. He also hit back at Trumka, saying he has represented workers poorly. U.S. and Canadian negotiators are scheduled for a midweek resumption of talks. Gernal Scott, Fox News.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Welcome back to the program. Call lines are open at 866-963-2037. 866-963-2037. Good to be with you today. And so I think we took just an interesting, I wouldn't call it a deep dive, but we definitely have a little bit more of an understanding of George Soros. And I think one of the things that we can do is, you know, as we learn more about what he's doing, we can cover it here on the program. We can buff up on it. We can definitely watch the interviews. I'm going to see if we can get Dinesh D'Souza back on the program. He's been on a couple of times. Great guest. He's so knowledgeable. See if we can get him on to talk about George Soros and his latest documentary that he has, which is not specifically about George Soros, but it's about America. And I'm interested in hearing more about what he has to say, what he's learned about him, and not for the purpose of demonizing him. I think his work speaks for itself, but more along the lines of really looking at just so he tends to take a role in international affairs, but what I saw in the audio was that he also tends to take, like, it's a different role here than it is in Great Britain, and it's a different role in Great Britain than it is in a country in South Africa. No matter what, his money affords him an audience with world leaders that it's unprecedented. It's like he's the president of his own country, but he's not. He doesn't have his own country. But he doesn't hesitate to meddle in other countries, robbing them of their resources. They say he gutted the Russian economy by moving on their markets and making announcements about their markets that completely destroyed so much of their wealth, which hurt middle-class Russians. And so, you know, these are things that we have to kind of keep in mind as we're going forward. Just to kind of complete the story about this university. So when Orban was elected prime minister this year, President Trump called him, and they have kind of reopened relations between Hungary and the United States, where they had been a little frosty and kind of not really substantial. And so we've had our ambassador go over to Hungary, and they've sent their foreign minister to the State Department. That was back in May. And there's even been discussion about a meeting between the Prime Minister Orban and President Trump himself, which Orban really wants that. He really wants to have a meeting with the President of the United States. The new U.S. ambassador in Budapest is a Trump appointee, David Kornstein, and he's going to be discussing the university and the possibilities because of, you know, the timing. January, they have to have the ability to have the university in Hungary renewed by that time. So in order to do that, they're going to have some communications between our U.S. ambassador and their prime minister. And apparently America wants Hungary to back off and let the CEU, with their dual accreditation in Hungary and the U.S., to remain there in Budapest. But I think Orban is going to be looking for ways that he can get something that he wants out of the deal with the university, namely that they would stop pushing these far-left liberal ideas that go against what Hungarians want for their culture. And how can I say that? Because they elected Orban. If they wanted a multicultural society, if they thought that was great, they would have elected someone who that was their they were running on that. They didn't. They elected someone who is being termed in this article as far right. I don't see it as being far right when you say, I'm all about this country. I like to use it, the same kind of analogy that people really seem to understand, and it really enrages liberals when I say this, but it's the truth. Are you pro, so for me it would be pro-Washington. Am I pro-Washington or am I pro the general public? In other words, if I had a chance to feed 20 strangers dinner tonight and leave my family hungry, or feed my husband and kids and say, listen, hopefully you have your own families, but I'm going to feed my family first. Which of those am I going to pick? Well, I'm obviously going to choose to feed my husband and the kids. It's the same thing with my husband. It's the same thing with the kids. Not that we don't care about what happens outside of our house, but we first take care of what's inside this house. That's the first priority. We don't earn money or do things that are to a benefit some strangers. We do the things that benefit our household first. We're primarily concerned with that. That is biblical. The Bible says a man who doesn't take care of his own wife and kids is worse than an infidel. That's what the Bible says. They're worse than an unbeliever. So why would not a nation, a sovereign nation, care for its own citizens first before going outside of its borders and caring for others? And that is the reason why you see Rand Paul rail against our USAID program and our foreign aid and the billions of dollars that we give away. We have to borrow money to give away to other countries. He rails against it because it is going against that core. It's just a basic common sense kernel. It's like as common as a penny that you take care of home first before you go out and take care of others. And if you take care of home first and you still are found wanting, that means you're not yet able to take care of others. It doesn't mean you won't at some point do that, or that you don't want to help, but it means that right now you need to first take care of your business at home, and proper ordering of priorities and resources yield you the ability at some point to be able to have more than enough and to be able to take care of others. It's that simple. It really is. So there's nothing far right about that. That is the way that liberals use language to demonize common sense principles like taking care of your own family first. So apparently, I guess Justice Kavanaugh is going to speak shortly, or maybe he already has. The joy of doing the show in the afternoon is we get all the morning news. The joy of the show in the afternoon is sometimes news is going on while we're on the air. So I get, we'll have more for you in tomorrow's show on the confirmation hearings, and we'll have audio and things like that. And we definitely want to hear from you on your opinions on what's going on. And so, yeah, it's just been a really interesting course of events. So I said we were going to talk about Governor Ducey nominating Senator John Kill to replace John McCain. So this is interesting because from what I can tell, first of all, John Kill is the one who's been kind of shepherding Justice Kavanaugh around Washington, D.C. during the confirmation process to the different offices of anyone who's wanted to interview him. John Kill has been taking him through that process. And John Kill was a senator. He retired. He's in his mid-70s, and he received the approval of Cindy McCain and others in the McCain world who have said, you know, they approve of him filling this role. Now, what's interesting about it is the buzz is already out there that apparently he's going to be filling this role until December, the December recess. So he'll be there long enough to vote to confirm Justice Kavanaugh and to take care of some unfinished business that votes they were unable to take due to John McCain's illness. And then after that, they'll move forward and they'll be moving on with a nominee, hopefully someone that could hold the position for much longer. And so, I think it's fantastic. At least it's someone we know is a reliable vote for the Kavanaugh nomination, and for some other things that need to get done, some other priorities in the Senate. And that will take the balance back to, 51 plus the vice president if there's a tiebreaker. And so that's, I think it's as good as we could expect. Now, the other piece of news that broke today that I thought was fascinating is Rahm Emanuel. He's the much beleaguered mayor of Chicago, who recently has had a number of core constituencies, namely the south side of Chicago, have turned against him because they feel he's standing in the way of them getting extra police, et cetera, et cetera. He came out with a statement saying that communities that don't work with the police have a moral problem, and it's culture that contributes to the high crime rate in south side of Chicago. And he was immediately vilified. And he lost even more of the support of the black community. And so I guess he sees the handwriting on the wall and he's not going to run again. What's interesting about that is that this seems to be an ongoing pattern. Anyone who speaks out about the rate of fatherlessness in the black community, the lack of kids getting a good education in the black community, the lack of control over the schools, et cetera, anyone who speaks out about that, all of a sudden the black community no longer supports them. It's as if truth-telling has become, a crime. So, of course, President Obama has weighed in. He issued a statement. He says, as a mayor, a congressman, and my first White House chief of staff, Rahm Emanuel has been a tireless and brilliant public servant. His work to improve our schools is paying dividends by helping our teachers and students achieve faster academic improvement than students in 96% of America's school districts. The announcement to establish universal pre-K in Chicago on top of universal kindergarten will give all of our kids the best possible start. And its implementation of debt-free community college will help prepare all of our young people for a new economy. With record job growth and record employment over his terms in office, Chicago is better and stronger for his leadership. And I was a better president for his wise counsel at a particularly perilous time for our country. I agree with him there. I've been blessed to call Rahm my friend. Whatever he chooses to do next, I know he'll continue to make a positive difference, just as he has throughout his career in public service. And Michelle and I wish Rahm and Amy all the best as they consider this next phase in their lives. So Rahm Emanuel's 58 years old. He's hardly done in politics, although he's got to be really tired, from being the mayor of Chicago. I would wonder if he wouldn't just take some time and just kind of be with his family and take some time off. You kind of also wonder, would he do statewide office in Illinois? The two senators from there are Dick Durbin and Tammy Duckworth. They're not going anywhere. Republican Governor Bruce Rauner is about to face re-election. But Rahm's Chicago record might have made him damaged goods for statewide for right now. He could also run for the House. He could try to go back into Congress. So a lot of speculation on what he plans to do, but he made the announcement with his wife standing at his side. And I think I just wish the people of Chicago could take a second and say, we've tried Democrat this, Democrat that for decades. They've just Democrat, Democrat, Democrat. Why not try some ideas that are different from the ones that have been tried to see if they could make some changes in communities, in the economic outlook, in the amount of people who are pouring out of Illinois. They're the number one for population loss in the country. People are leaving Illinois in droves, not just because of the taxes, but because of the crime and the corruption and the graft and the taxes. Yeah, the taxes are a huge factor. So it's been rough. So there's that. And then we kind of circle back around to Colin Kaepernick because apparently I'm wondering so there's some allegations that he's possibly been on the Nike payroll since 2011. So Kaepernick and Nike actually agreed to a new contract, even though he's been with Nike since 2011. So interest from other shoe companies played a role in Nike deciding to sign him. The contract is a wide endorsement where Kaepernick would have his own branded line, including shoes, shirts, jerseys, and more. Kaepernick signed a star contract that puts him on the level with a top-end NFL player worth millions per year plus royalties. And, oh, wow. We haven't heard much of him in the other endorsement world, but apparently he was always on the payroll with Nike. So that hasn't changed. So he's gotten this really big deal with them, and it just remains to be seen how they're going to handle it since they're losing market share. A part of what they use to pay these big celebrities is, money generated from selling stock. When people dump your stock off because they don't like a decision that you've made, it makes it kind of hard to justify that decision. It's a contract, though, so it will be, what is there a way to get out? I don't know. Apparently, he's been with them for quite a while. 2011, that's a long time. I just wish that at some point he could admit that the ridiculousness that he perpetuated with the kneeling on the job has cost him dearly, and then he could tell the people who actually think he did the right thing in doing that, look, I had a huge platform. I have a huge platform. Colin Kaepernick has lots of followers on Instagram and social media where he could have done amazing activism and kept it away from his job. Had he done that, he'd still be playing football. He'd still be rich. He'd still be able to do. All right? So when we get back, no, we're not getting back. That's the end of the show. Tomorrow, we'll be back with you with more Stacey on the Right tomorrow. God bless and have a fantastic evening.